Ellen Miles, founder of Nature is a Human Right. Ellen, can you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your campaign?
Yeah, of course. So I'm Ellen, as you know. I'm an activist and a social entrepreneur and the founder of Nature is a Human Right, which exists as an organisation to make access to nature a recognised human right, which means from the very top down, petitioning the United Nations to formally enshrine access to green spaces as a right for all rather than a privilege. It means at the middle level, working with local policymakers, governments, councils, local authorities to enact this in their area. And then from the ground up, at the grassroots level, it's empowering people to take local greening action into their own hands.
Yeah, that's cool. Okay. So what sort of social problems are you trying to solve through this campaign?
So I think as with any community-led action, one aim is obviously to increase a sense of belonging and agency within your area, and I think that's probably true of all tactical urbanism. So I'll slightly gloss over that and get to the more specific aim of this grassroots action and guerrilla gardening, which is to solve the issue of nature deprivation.
Yeah.
So as the world urbanizes and as our cities get more densely populated, the outlook for most people in the world is increasingly more grey than green, which is literally unnatural, you know.
Yeah.
After water, concrete is the most used substance on the planet. So there's something like, in the time it takes me to say this sentence, about 20,000 bathtubs of concrete will be poured out around the world.
Terrifying.
It's a lot. Yeah, it's a lot. Yeah, it's really, so there's increasingly less green and more grey.
Yeah.
And so in England alone, 11 million people are nature deprived. So that was some research that Friends of the Earth released this year. And 2.7 million people in the UK live further than 10 minutes walk away in any direction from any green space.
Yeah.
Which is a lot of people. And that also came out this year. That was Filton Trust. And I think the reason that all this research is coming out this year is because we've seen, as a result of the pandemic and lockdowns and health gaps, that there is huge disparity in access to nature. So nature deprivation is one issue, but more importantly, it's a social inequality, it's a social justice issue. So
yeah, and it has a really big impact on people's health and well-being, not being able to access nature as well, doesn't it?
Yeah, exactly. So it's been linked to many kinds of mental illness. So, you know, having more green space in an area has been linked to less requests for antidepressants. It's been linked to lower incidences of panic attacks, anxiety. More greenery increases children's IQ, they found out this year. There's lower crime rates, people have longer lifespans. There's a huge number of serious health conditions that arise from nature deprivation and can be prevented by or mitigated by having more nature around.
So you can't really go wrong by giving people more access to nature, can you?
No, exactly. It's all good, and you know, it seems like when you do increase nature in an area, the returns on that, if we're talking purely financially, are huge. You can get a sort of 7 times return on your investment for for every pound you put in to increase people's connection with nature and contact with nature on a daily basis. In terms of, you know, reduced strain on the NHS, reduced reliance on mental health services, reduced crime rates, things like that.
Definitely.
Which is fascinating, and it just is such a no-brainer. But yeah, we're not seeing it happen as much as we need to.
Okay. How do you think we can use tactical urbanism to help tackle this issue of nature deprivation?
So I think part of the issue and why we need tactical kind of community-led urbanism and guerrilla gardening, which I guess is the kind of greening subset of tactical urbanism, is that typically the areas that are funded most from, you know, local authorities, etc., are wealthier and whiter neighborhoods. They tend to be way leafier, greener. There's better funded parks. Everyone's got, you know, big private gardens.
Lined roads.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Leafy schools for kids and stuff, whereas the lower income areas and areas whose residents are more likely to be people of colour, the green space is really limited.
Yeah.
So community-led green action, tactical urbanism, greening urbanism, can mean that people can green the parts of our cities and of their neighbourhoods that are neglected by the powers that be, and which don't receive the attention and the funding they should. It allows us to take that into our own hands and pour love and colour and joy into all the cracks in our cities that just get forgotten.
Okay, can you tell us a little bit more about how guerrilla gardening and that sort of thing work?
Yeah, so essentially it's about transforming neglected, unloved, bare patches of land into vibrant pockets of green life. So whether that's an empty street tree pit, the beds that street trees come in that are normally just bare, or whether it's an old car park that you can depave or you can cover with raised beds. It's about finding colourless grey spaces, or whether it's a wall or a roof, and making them green through action that is independent from anything sanctioned or anything kind of led by an official government or council authority. It's basically doing things independently, and the word guerrilla comes from that kind of
tactical.
Yeah, exactly, like guerrilla warfare and all of this stuff. And it's about kind of being a bit of a renegade and a bit of a vigilante, I guess.
So you can still do that sort of thing on private space as well.
Well, so technically it's meant to be on land that's not your own. I think if it's your own land, it's not really guerrilla gardening, but I think in the spirit of it, we should all be, depaving our front gardens if you've got a concrete one and all that. But it's meant to be on kind of public land. So obviously in England, something like 92% of the land is out of bounds to everyone, to most of the population, because of the trespass. Civil offence, and a lot of the land in cities is kind of owned by councils and things like that. So we don't actually have, and in London, only one in five homes don't have any outside space. So for lots of reasons, the places people can plant are limited. And so it's about kind of reclaiming the land back as citizens in ways that are beneficial to the community. So if there is just a complete, if the council have neglected this corner of the park and it's just completely arid in terms of biodiversity, it's just got some cut grass and things, why not, as a resident of that neighbourhood, as a member of that community, say, actually, no, I'm going to plant some tomatoes here or whatever.
Yeah, exactly. If it's public space, why shouldn't it be?
Exactly.
It should that benefits the public. Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah. So it's about saying, this is where I live and this is my home, and our community gardens should be our community's gardens and not something kind of owned and regulated by a bunch of people sat in an ivory tower office block up the road.
I feel like a lot of the time as well, you were talking about people's houses. If you offered to do up their garden for them, if it was run down, most people are going to say yes to that, aren't they?
Absolutely. Yeah, that's actually happened. So there's a guy who lives near me called Charlie who does that. So he actually has got a group together. So I've got my little group of guerrilla gardeners that meet on Sundays, and he's got his group of community gardeners also. And what they do is they go around to people's houses who may be isolated, maybe they're older people, maybe they're people that just don't have the time or the know-how how to make their front gardens greener at the street level, and they completely do them up. So it's increasing the greenery and the biodiversity on our street-facing gardens. So it's kind of public, and that's obviously really beneficial to the community as a whole. So it's still done with permission of the landowner, but it's for the benefit of the community as well.
And the community responded well then to these guerrilla gardening projects that you've done?
Yeah, so whenever I've been out, on my knees in a street tree bed or whatever it might be, I've only ever had people coming past to say thank you and even can I get involved. You know, we've had people join the group because they've just been wandering past and they said like, what is this? I love it. I live around the corner. I really want to get involved. What you're doing sounds amazing.
Yeah.
People come and offer us teas and coffees out their windows, you know, things like that. So the response has only ever been good. I don't really know of anyone that's ever been shouted at or had any passers-by be annoyed with them as a result of what they were doing, because essentially what you're doing is
good for everybody.
Yeah, I can't imagine why someone would have an issue with it.
Why would somebody have an issue with more nature or colour being put into their neighbourhood?
Yeah, although there must, I don't know, because whenever I've spoken to the council, they always seem to have this vision in their head of this kind of busybody person who's going to be anti any kind of change that you do. They're like, oh, well, what if someone wants to like let their dog wee there? What if someone, you know, thinks it's a trip hazard, or all of these things. But I think that's just being overly cautious. I've never encountered that in real life. And I would be really surprised by that, to be honest. I don't think that that's how people genuinely think. I do think councils can just be very nervous to do things because they have this person in their mind who they think is very anti everything. And I'm sure it's because of, you know, those are the people they probably do deal with. It's probably the people that are complaining about things.
A lot of the time they have to deal with. The people with the complaints are the loudest. That's
exactly. So it makes the most fuss when 100% of my encounters have been positive and have been really encouraging.
Can you think of any potential challenges or barriers that people might face, though, even if you haven't, and how they might try to overcome it?
There's lots of barriers at different stages to entry. So the most common barrier I've found is that people just don't know where to start. So I've been trying to encourage people through my platforms to kind of do this themselves, and people go, I love the idea of it, but I just don't know where to start, you know, I don't. So I've created some resources actually to help this. So I've created a quick guide, which essentially breaks it down into steps. So, you know, step 1, find a site, just find a bare patch of soil. If you go for a walk in your area, you'll be so amazed at how many spots you actually find. Once your eyes are open to it, it's kind of crazy. You see them everywhere. And then choose your plants. So like for this time of year, you can plant bulbs, depending on, you know, in spring, you can do basically loads more, but think about what time of year it is, think about what's going to be hardy, what's going to survive well in the street. You know, you can't be trying to plant really delicate plants.
Something you're not going to have to water constantly.
Exactly. Yeah, you want it to do its own thing. You want it to be something that's going to be like colourful and impactful as well. You know, there's no point putting something in if it's not really benefiting people in that way. Anyway, all of those things. So that resource kind of goes through that. And then other barriers that people face, I mean, the classic barriers are just kind of time and money. There's always ways to find money for this kind of thing, though. There are so many funds set up to help people to do this. So one, Space Hive. I don't know if you know Space Hive. They're a kind of online platform that help people to raise funding for tactical urbanism projects, basically, and a lot of greening ones too. I think the main barrier people face is just a lack of confidence in their own skills and knowledge. And I've taught myself from scratch, basically just by Googling everything. And if I can do it, then anyone can do it. You know, I'm not a gardening expert. I'm not a community organising expert, but I've done both of those things now just by starting small and kind of incrementally building up.
People need to look for their local networks and try to get the ball rolling.
Yeah,
which is obviously easier said than done. But
exactly. I think there's a big issue in this space where it's a very fragmented scene and there's a lack of visibility across lines. So you might not know that people up the road are doing this. You might not know how to contact them. And that is actually another thing I'm trying to build out, is this membership network. So a map of the local greening organisations that there are that you can join in, kind of community-led action, and just other individuals that are doing it. So you can connect with people and skill swap. So like if one person's an expert carpenter and the other person's, you know, design, like, can you create some street furniture together, or a planter? Or if one person's a gardener and one person's a community organizer, how can you collaborate across lines and share your skills to do something positive?
Do you think there's scope for tactical urbanism and guerrilla gardening in particular being scaled up from a local level?
I think it by nature has to be hyper-local. I think because the responses are so attuned to, or they're, sorry, I don't know if that was me, because the responses are so based on hyperlocal problems or opportunities, you know, a particular street corner, a particular alleyway, so niche. I don't know how it can be really scaled, and also the different challenges people face in terms of what the council will allow, or what's physically possible, or what the community wants, you know, what kind of plants that community find joy from, etc.
So you almost need the local knowledge, local knowledge to solve the local problems, would you say?
Exactly. But what I do think is missing is some kind of centralized space just to help people get started, and to have a rough framework that can work anywhere, so it can be accessed by anyone anywhere. So for instance, that kind of step-by-step guide, that is relevant wherever you live. You just need to then translate it by, you know, the first step is find a site, and then it's up to you. What is your site locally? It's very specific, and then it's choose your plants, and that again is a very personal decision and a very community-led decision, what that's going to be, and what does the design look like. Is it kind of going to be a little space for people to sit and have a picnic? Is it going to have art there? You know, what's that going to look like? It's very personal, but what I do think you can have is this more general framework which anyone can access, and a network where people then can share ideas and share opportunities
and pool resources.
Exactly, yeah, and share learnings and things, you know, and maybe do coordinated national actions as well. So say, you know, like, oh, on the 1st of March, everyone's going to go and plant
guerilla gardening day.
Yeah, exactly. And there have been things like that before with sunflowers. That's been a really popular one. There's been parking day, where people have put mini parks in parking.
The pop-up parks,
in where, you know, where people normally park alongside the roads, things like that. There have been loads of things like that before, and I think it's really nice to see how that you are part of a bigger community, because it's nice to connect people on your local level, but it's great to feel like you're part of something bigger as well. I think, like you were saying, people a lot of the time just find it hard to be the first person to do it in their area, and that's one of the main barriers. So having that network of other people that are doing it, and you can see that they've been successful, is a good way to get to start these initiatives in other places. Yeah, I think people shouldn't be afraid to start their own thing, though. I think it can seem a bit overwhelming, but I guess my advice would be, if you break it down into small components, it makes everything so much more manageable, and then you can kind of celebrate the small wins and build your confidence, build your skills, build your knowledge, build your network as you go. I think another key thing is, when you are doing it with the community, is to the more soft skills side of things, you know, the willingness to compromise and to veer off from what was your specific vision, vision for it, and to collaborate. I think that's really crucial.
I suppose if you're going to do a project for the community, you've got to be willing to be flexible in terms of what your vision is, because ultimately it's not your guerrilla garden, it's the community's.
Yeah, you're not this kind of, you know, parachuted in savior because then you'll know better than you know, the kind of council solution.
Councils, yeah.
Exactly. So, you know, that's the whole point, really.
Okay. So we're going to ask a couple of questions that we're asking to all of the people we're interviewing.
Go for it.
So, what advice would you give to somebody who wanted to carry out their own tactical urbanism project?
I would say think really hard about what problem you're trying to solve and who it's for, and make sure that you're really speaking to those people and understanding that. You know, maybe it is you, maybe it's your family in your street. If it's other people, just make sure you're bringing them in and co-designing as much as possible. And then, as I've said, and I'll say again, just break everything down into manageable chunks, and then you can feel great as you kind of tick through each thing, and then it'll seem less daunting. I think these things can seem very overwhelming, but once you start to think about it in its component parts, and if you're doing it with the communities as well, you can kind of each lead your own part of it, and then it becomes a lot more manageable and a lot more fun.
Cool, that's great. So sort of related to that, if you could give one cheap and easy tactical urbanism project that somebody could do on no budget or a low budget, what would it be?
So I'd obviously advocate for something greening related. So in terms of something that will really cost nothing, you can use your recycling to make planters and to make a living wall. So you can use,
Cool.
cartons that orange juice or oat milk, whatever you drink, comes in. So you can use old plastic bottles if you've got, a big fizzy drink bottle or a water bottle lying around, and you can turn them into planters by kind of cutting a rectangle off one side, filling it with soil, and then hanging it up with just some string. And then you can hang them on railings or fences or walls, and you can make a living wall. You can, really transform a space with these.
So how does the living wall work? Is that a lot of those cartons all added together?
Yeah, you could hang them off. So it kind of depends on the wall. You'd have to maybe, if it's a wooden kind of fence wall, that's ideal, because then you can hang it through the slots, or you can put hooks into it, which you're going to string off, or what you can do is you can hang each bottle off the one on top of it with string, so they just kind of cascade down like a waterfall effect. Yeah. But otherwise, if you've got, like railings, if you've got a balcony, things like that, you can hang them off there. You can get creative, really. There's loads of different ways you can do it, and you can obviously make different designs and plant them at different heights and have different things in them. And you can do food if you want.
In your how-to guide for guerrilla gardening, you talk about seed bombs as well.
Yes. Oh yeah, those are cheap and easy. So you can make them with leftover waste paper, essentially. So if you get about 4 scraps of paper, paper works well. Any paper that is matte is good. So normal kind of printer paper, writing paper, things like that. Don't use wrapping paper or magazine paper, things like that. Things that you can't really compost, those don't work. So soak it in water, soak it in hot water, and then just mush it up with your hands, or you can blend it in a blender if you're lazy like I am. Then mix in a packet of seeds. Local pollinator friendly wildflower seeds are great. We love pollinators. And then, yeah, exactly. Save the bees. You mix the seeds in through the mush that you've now got, and then you drain it out by kind of straining it through a tea towel or an old t-shirt or something. All the kind of paper mache clump that you kind of now have into lots of little 1-inch balls, or smaller if you want, and then dry them out in a cardboard box by a radiator in just a warm, dry place, so that the seeds don't germinate. Yeah. And then they'll keep for like a couple of years if you want. But basically, then I keep where most people keep their keys by the door, I keep a bowler full of seed balls. So that when I'm going out, you can just grab one and take it with you. They're not going to do great now. I wouldn't really be doing it at the moment because winter. But autumn, spring, they're great. Just carry one out. You see a patch of land that's looking sad, chuck it on it and let nature do the rest.
So people should start making their seed balls now, ready for the new year. Seed balls
now, yeah, exactly. I've put a tutorial up on Instagram and on TikTok. I've done another one, which I've done a paper one, and I've also done one with clay.
Okay.
Which is slightly more environmentally friendly.
I've got some here actually.
But it's slightly less accessible because not everyone has clay on them.
I have to say, I bought mine online.
Oh yeah.
There's a site called Bee Bombs. Shameless plug.
Oh yeah, I know.
They make the same sort of thing. They're like
yeah. Well, I'm about to start, once I've launched my social enterprise, which is going to be this resource fountain for guerrilla gardening, which is going to have these guides, it's going to have videos, it's going to have starter kits and stuff. There'll be seed bombs on that as well, and also DIY seed bomb kits, so you can buy your own seed packets and all the bits you need and put them together.
I've seen things about I don't know how to say it. They're called like alder trees or elder trees.
Alder trees,
yeah, those ones. And you can make similar things to the seed bombs for those, can't you?
Can you? Oh, I didn't know that. I'll have to look into it. Yeah, I normally just go with wildflower seeds. Yeah, you can do it with all sorts actually. I think one thing I would just say as a cautionary tale is just to not often with guerrilla gardening, with people like Ron Finley, people want to go in and do food, which is really great. And I'm a huge advocate of having community food gardens. I think it's where our society should be going for a number of reasons. But city soil can be contaminated, and unless you're 100% sure that it's not, I would not start planting some food on the side of the street, because you don't want to poison anyone.
So you can plant sunflowers, can't you?
Sunflowers are immediate
clean up the soil.
Exactly. So plant sunflowers for a bit. They will sap the toxins out from the soil, and then you're in a place to do it. Yeah.
Okay, that's great. So if you could give us 3 words that come to mind when you think about tactical urbanism and placemaking, what would they be?
It's funny, this is slightly off topic, but it's funny because urbanism, so when I think about tactical urbanism, obviously this whole conversation we've been talking about guerrilla gardening, but in normal conversation, urban and nature are diametrically opposed, so they're used as like antonyms for each other. So it's strange to think of, pardon?
But they shouldn't be, should they?
No, and it's strange to think of gardening as an urbanism. You know, I don't think they should be, and I think that's why we're kind of falling into this issue with our cities becoming more and more nature depleted, is that we think of urban as this, you know, nature desert essentially.
Yeah,
I don't think we should.
I get what you mean. There's a sort of people get this idea that humans are sort of separate from nature, so that as we're like building our cities and developing our technologies, we're breaking away from nature, but it shouldn't be like that.
Yeah, I've talked about this in another interview recent, actually, where I was saying that I think that one of the contributing factors to us being in such a nature deprived state now is that for so long our society has viewed progression away from nature as progress, as desirable progress. And I think, you know, we can see that in the way that indigenous peoples have been treated and like massively undervalued. I mean, that's an understatement. Exploited and and now I think the tide is slightly turning. We're realizing that actually we genetically need contact with nature, and we can only progress so far if we start to destroy our own natural habitat, and we will not survive as a species if we do not. And, you know, it is essential to our well-being and our mental health and our physical health in so many ways, and it's not progress to be shut out from nature. And we need to do like soon.
We can only get so far if we can only get so far without nature before we sort of start falling to bits.
Exactly. I mean, we're at that point now, aren't we?
Yeah.
But anyway, three words relating to tactical urbanism. I would say community, absolutely, the first one. Action, I think it's very active, I think it's very doing. And the third one, I would say anarchy. And I think in the purest sense, you know, of freedom from the kind of constrictions of top-down dictates, and not in the sense of chaos that people tend to associate with anarchy, but in the sense of real people power, you know?
Yeah, sort of decentralization.
Yeah.
Okay, that's great.